The current crisis in the Ukraine has spawned a geopolitical standoff between Russia and the United States and its NATO allies, which is eerily similar to one of the defining events of the 20th century, the Cold War, on Moments in Minutes. The Cold War was, historically, an unconventional war in the sense that there were no direct conflicts between the two main antagonists. It was called a Cold War because it was essentially a war of words. This war of words was conducted through proxy wars, with direct and indirect support from the Western Bloc, the United States and its NATO allies, and the Eastern Bloc, the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact countries. The exact timeline of the Cold War is debated amongst historians, but is generally considered to be between 1945 and 1991. The causes of the Cold War are also disputed. Some historians believe that the causes of the war stem from the period immediately following World War II, while others believe that the causes of the war go back even much further to the First World War, where, following a disastrous campaign, the Bolshevik-led October Revolution of 1917 turned Russia into a communist bastion. The United States, on the other hand, came out of the war a confident capitalist powerhouse, whose global political power grew in prestige in the lead-up to the Second World War. At the end of World War II, the temporarily allied Soviet Union and the United States began to consolidate their positions east and west of the German capital, Berlin. This became the epicenter of the Cold War, but other conflicts in the Middle East, Latin America, Asia and Africa also became ideological battlefronts for the two superpowers. These events played out in the background of the threat of a nuclear war, where both the United States and the Soviet Union became engaged in an arms race, which threatened global security and peaked with the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. In 1985, however, new Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev introduced reforms aimed at reorganization and openness, which, coupled with the demands for independence from the Warsaw Pact countries, led to revolutions and the dismantling and overthrow of communist regimes throughout Central and Eastern Europe. And on December the 25th, 1991, the Soviet Union was officially dissolved, effectively making the United States the world's sole superpower. Because the Cold War ended less than a quarter of a century ago, its legacy is still in its infancy, but its impacts are far-reaching. When we talk about the Cold War, we often talk about nuclear technology, and both the military and commercial use of nuclear fission have had major environmental effects. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were the start of a series of nuclear production, experimentation and testing that occurred throughout the world during the course of the Cold War. These events led to deformities, abnormalities, and even death due to radiation exposure amongst military personnel and civilian populations. The 1986 Chernobyl nuclear disaster in Ukraine, for example, caused anywhere between 200,000 and nearly 1 million premature cancer deaths between 1986 and 2004 alone. Since there was no agreement that officially ended the Cold War, both Russia and the United States continue to use and modify nuclear technology, such as nuclear-powered aircraft carriers and submarines. But this has given incentives to other countries who were previously not considered nuclear weapon states to test and develop their own nuclear devices. The most obvious and potentially dangerous example of this is North Korea. After developing nuclear capabilities in the 1990s, North Korea continues to use nuclear weapons as a political bargaining tool to influence regional foreign policy. As a result, nuclear warfare and nuclear terrorism remain real threats to global security. Just as the nuclear threat has survived the aftermath of the Cold War, so too has its geopolitics. Russia's alleged military intervention in Ukraine and its alleged annexation of Crimea in 2014 have raised tensions between Russia and the United States and the European Union. This does not necessarily mean, however, that we are entering Cold War 2.0, as Russia has strong global political power as a member of the BRICS countries and is a main supplier of natural gas and oil to many European countries. But recent NATO troop buildup in the Baltic states and the ongoing crisis in Ukraine continue to pose geopolitical questions. Just as the political games of the Cold War continue to play out, so too does popular culture's reliance on the Cold War for entertainment. The Americans, a television show about two sleeper KGB agents living as ordinary Americans in the United States during the Cold War, was rated the 6th best new TV show by Metacritic in 2013 and is about to begin its 4th season. 2010's Iron Man 2, the American Cold War legacy is tested, as Russian scientist Ivan Vankov describes Tony Stark, and Americans metaphorically, as thieves and butchers, and that Americans forget all the lives that they have destroyed. Despite the Cold War ending nearly 25 years ago, its impacts continue to be felt. It remains a vital legacy to modern economics, politics, environmental issues, and popular culture. Thank you so much for your time today. Moments in Minutes is a channel dedicated to making history more accessible to you, the modern day scholar. We give you the what and the how, but more importantly, we give you the why of history. Why it matters to you, and why it matters for our modern world. If you have any historical events that you would like me to cover in future episodes, please let me know in the comment section below. And don't forget to subscribe to Moments in Minutes, creating history every week.